Let me see. Can everybody see my slides?
Mhm.
Yep. So a little bit about myself. Alan Barnard, I grew up in manufacturing. I'm an industrial engineer, grew up in South Africa, and have been working in manufacturing since I was about 15 years old. So manufacturing is very, very close to my heart. I studied industrial engineering, and that's when I read The Goal by Dr. Eli Goldratt. I couldn't wait to start implementing it. My first job was head of engineering for the largest cookware company in Africa. And that's where I had my first opportunity to implement theory of constraints. And the results were pretty astounding. It was a company that was over 100 years old, and yet we were able to double the throughput through our factories without increasing significantly OPEX or CAPEX. We got our due date performance up from about 30% to 100% all the time. And it was soon after that, back in 1992, that I was very lucky to have met Dr. Eli Goldratt. I stayed in manufacturing, but we stayed very close, and he kept on saying, come on, let's work together. And in 2008, we co-founded Goldratt Research Labs. And the company is really just helping organizations answer two simple questions: is how much better can you do, and how best to do it? What's the simplest, fastest, lowest cost way of doing that? And of course, theory of constraints plays a big role in that, because it says whether you've got a company that has 3 links in your chain or 30,000 links, there's always a weakest link, and you should focus on that. But that's just one performance dimension that you can improve in a system, is the strength or the throughput. But there's 3 others that you can improve. You might focus on speed. Maybe you're doing enough, but you could get a premium if you could do it faster. So that's like the longest link in the chain. So why is my chain so long? Where's the longest link that I can focus on to reduce that? That's typically the objective. If I'm in a project environment, I'm not that much interested to increase throughput necessarily, but I want to reduce the time it takes me to do a project. The other 2 dimensions is I want to improve the reliability of my chain. That's where Six Sigma, for example, comes in, and it says, where's the faultiest link? That might be the leverage point to focus on to do better, or even much better. And then the other 4th dimension, of course, is cost, which is represented by the weight of the chain. So where is the heaviest link in my system? And it's those 4 dimensions that I think captures the essence of what we are trying to do when we are trying to continuously improve any system. I want to do more, faster, better, cheaper. And that's really what our organization is focused on. And we've had the privilege of working with some of the leading organizations in the world, but also small and medium-sized manufacturers. And so that's a little bit of an introduction. I hope that was useful. 2 people that have really, really impacted my life, of course, is Dr. Eli Goldratt. The other one is Nassim Taleb. In my book, my new book, I don't know if you've seen that or read that, but in the introduction, I tell the story of how that happened. It was literally a few days after Dr. Goldratt had passed away in 2011. And one of my clients is Penguin Random House, and I was on my way. We had done an implementation of theory of constraints at Penguin Random House. I had a session with the CEO, and we talked about the results that they were getting in their distribution system with theory of constraints. And, he said, I'm so sorry to have heard about Eli. And he asked me whether I've read any books by Nassim Taleb. And I said, yes, of course. I read Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness. And he said to me, I've got a special gift for you. And he took out this special pre-published copy of Anti-Fragile. And I literally couldn't wait to get back to my hotel room to read it. It was one of only 2 books that I read cover to cover in one sitting. The other one was The Goal. And what struck me there was basically what Taleb had done was to allow us to think very differently about not just our company, but about any system. And that system could be a person, it could be a relationship, is to say that when we look at our past performance, um, we should be very careful to extrapolate from a system's past performance when we are predicting its future performance. And he suggested that a much more useful way of looking at a system is to look at how it would respond to stress. And that by far the majority of systems are actually quite fragile because they are harmed more by negative stress than what they benefit from positive stress. So if you look at this chart, you've probably seen it before, but you've got on a horizontal axis, you've got a negative stress, and you've got a positive, the positive and negative impact on the vertical axis. And what this is saying is that here's a system that looks like it has limited gain from increasing positive stresses. So I sell 10% more and I make more money. I sell 20% more, I make more money. I sell 30% more, I don't make more money. Why? Because I've hit some kind of capacity constraint or supply constraint or cash constraint or management attention constraint. Whereas on the other side of that vertical, I lose 10% of my revenue and it hurts me, but I'm okay. I can survive. I lose 20%. It hurts me more, but I can survive. But I lose 50% and I go bankrupt. So there's sort of unlimited pain while we have limited gain. And then he said, well, what's the opposite of fragile? Because that's clearly not a good thing. Because even if you get random stresses, positive and negative stresses, over time they will compound and you'll end up dying. And he said, well, most people think that the opposite of fragile is robust, resilient. But it turns out that that is just a system that has both limited pain and limited gain. And these are typically, if you think about a luxury retailer, right? We recently worked with Ralph Lauren to help them optimize their inventories in their store. We built a digital twin, found out if it was possible to reduce shortages and surpluses inside of their own stores. But when you look at the financial performance of that company going back, the last decade, what you find is that their performance kind of looks like this robust curve. It's an S curve. So when there's a downturn in the market, it hurts them, but not that much. And when there's an upturn in the market, they benefit, but not that much. So actually, over the long term, as long as they have about equal amount of positive and negative stresses, about equal amount of good and bad years, they tend to be okay. They survive. So what Taleb said, well, what is the opposite of robust or fragile? And he had to coin a new word, which is anti-fragile. And that's basically this system that has a convex response. And that's really what you want. You want a system that has a mechanism that can protect you against downside stresses, downside risks, can limit the pain from that, while at the same time have mechanisms that allows you to fully capitalize on the upside. And a really good example of this would be Uber, right? Uber doesn't own the drivers. They don't own the cars. So during a downturn, yes, it hurts them, but it's very difficult to imagine how big of a downturn it must be for Uber to go bankrupt, because the consumption fundamentally of their service is not going to dramatically reduce when there's a significant downturn. At the same time, if there's a sudden upturn, a specific part of the day where the demand exceeds supply, their system has mechanisms that instantly respond to that. And they use surge pricing for that. For me, pricing is a flow control mechanism, right? I have too much demand, I increase my price to control the flow. I have too little demand, I can reduce my price. So the fact that they can quickly change their price is extremely useful for a couple of reasons. One is when demand exceeds supply in your company, you need a fair way to prioritize. Who are you going to supply your product or service to? And in the case of Uber, what they've discovered is that there's a cost of getting an Uber, and then there's a cost of not getting an Uber. And for some people, the cost of not getting an Uber when they really need it is extremely high. I'm going to miss my flight, for example. I'm going to miss an important meeting with a client. And then I'm quite happy to pay 2 times or 3 times the price. I'm not happy to pay that all the time, but if there's a scarcity of cars, I really want a system to instantly acknowledge that I should get higher priority because I need it more than anybody else. And the simplest way for me to let the system know that is that I'm willing to pay a premium. So we've taken that mechanism, for example, with one of our biggest clients, Tata Steel. We've built into our service level agreements that when inventory starts dropping, it's a sign that demand starts exceeding supply. Now, what would you like your steel producer to do? Well, one option which they try in the past is let's be fair. So if I only have 50% of capacity compared to the current spike in demand, then if you give me an order for 100 tons, I'll give you 50 tons. So we try to be fair and give everybody the same proportion based on how much capacity we've got compared to demand. But what often happens during a crisis, people panic and they overorder. So the first time they order 100 tons and they only get 50 tons, the next time they need 100 tons, they'll order 200 tons. And suddenly you've got this bullwhip effect in manufacturing, and you have no idea which of your orders are real orders or which are overreactions. So in our service level agreement, we have a very simple price escalation mechanism that says we currently have a shortage of this product and we've increased the price initially by 10, then 20, then 30% until it stabilizes. And what that does automatically is it says to a customer that if you're sitting with 3 months of stock of steel, don't buy now because we're charging a premium. But if you're sitting with 3 days, we're charging a premium, we will prioritize your order and we'll make sure you don't run out. So that was extremely useful to think about it. And I want you to think about, as we're going through sort of the hot seat where you'll share a little bit about your company or your organization, is to think about, do you fundamentally have these two mechanisms in place? One, which is by far most important, is to protect yourself from the downside risk. You know, Taleb talks about it's like the Greek mythological character Democles, which is lying comfortable, you know, on the bed, surrounded by these beautiful women. They think it's absolutely in heaven. What they don't notice is this little sword that's hanging over their head. And if they make the wrong move, the sword drops and they're gone. So you first want to protect yourself against downside risk and then see how I can capitalize on upside. Now, I like to make sense of the world by building models. A 2x2 matrix is one of the models that I use to understand the world. And what you might notice here is there's a glaring empty box. And this bothered me for some time. And then I said, let me try to put in the empty box. And I realized that Taleb missed one type of system. I called it bipolar or boom bust. So it's a system that not only has unlimited gain potential, but it also has unlimited pain potential. And you really, you know, startups are in this world where you see a startup that just grows massively and then a month later they're gone. So you want to make sure that you don't fall into that category. And then the last thing that I want to just share with you, what I also noticed is if I put a tiny little box around the center of all of these, what do I notice? Is they all look similar. So it turns out that the only way to know whether my company or me as an individual or the relationship I'm in is fragile, robust, anti-fragile, or bipolar is to actually stress it substantially. Both give it a massive negative stress, see how it reacts, or a massive positive stress, see how it reacts. Then I will know where I am, and then I can figure out, okay, if I don't like it, how do I get to anti-fragile? So I hope that was a useful introduction, just level the playing fields, that we're all using the same language. Nell, I'll hand it back to you to facilitate the rest.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Excellent. And yes, it does give us a framework in which we can have our conversation going forward in this mastermind. I want to give Aaron Westfall a chance, though, to introduce himself. Thank you. Welcome, Aaron. We're glad
Sorry,
to have
guys.
you here.
Thank you for having me. I ran a little bit late this morning. My name is Aaron Westfall. I'm the executive vice president of a company called Kiosk Group. Kiosk Group is a light manufacturing company out of Maryland. We focus on self-service kiosk manufacturing. So we do metalwork, plastics, anything to build the entire kiosk, wire integrations, OEM integrations. We work in just about every vertical from ticketing to healthcare to nonprofit. Thank you guys.
Excellent, excellent. And just so that we have kind of the rules of the game today, let me just share a little slide show and then we'll get going. Okay, let's see. Okay, so welcome again. And we've done our introductions, and Dr. Barnard has set a framework, and we're going to set the expectations on ourselves as we're engaging here today. We did have the anti-fragile framework. Thank you very much, Dr. Barnard, very eloquent and excellent. Then each one of us is going to be on the hot seat to explain issues that we're facing today that we'd like help from the group around. And it's going to be a section in our program where we talk about what it is that we are tackling today and how we'd like to look, how our company, we'd like our company to look in the future. Then we're going to rotate around the room and share thoughts around each one's issues. And please feel free to share. This is going to be just a private, it's not going to be publicly shared. It's a private conversation for each one of us here. But ultimately, we want to have takeaways at the end. We want each one of you to feel like you've had time well spent while you were here. So let's do share and give during this mastermind. We all can learn from each other. This is a very powerful format for us to be able to create together. So let's begin. So let's have a volunteer as to who would like to share an issue that they'd like to have some help around today. Well, Aaron, since you had the floor last, why don't we let you go?
Oh man, I knew that was going to happen.
Kind of like the army system, any volunteers to
That's
clean the
all right.
toilets, you,
No,
you, and you.
Right.
that's right. No, that this is a supportive group, and that's why we're here. That's the
Sure.
purpose of the mastermind.
Yeah,
This is
no,
gonna
it's great. I mean, I wrote down a couple things here, right? One thing that wanted to, ask the group since I've only been in manufacturing for probably half a dozen years, right? Where I bet some of you have, quadrupled that. But we came into business in 2011 and it was really just a job shop before that, right? So we've really been trying to change it since me and my partner took over in about 2019, and for 2.5 years there, we couldn't do a lot with COVID and supply chains, right? And so I think one of the things that we're really working on right now is like percent of profit in manufacturing, right? Like what is an average percent of profit for manufacturers, or does it differ between different types of manufacturing, right? Because we're looking up for a lot of different things and we see all kinds of crazy numbers. We think that we need to be in the 30 to 40% range, but I would say that even when we grow, that doesn't seem to cut it for overhead when it comes to space, employees, and then growth for new machines. So right now we're like I'd say a $3.5 million company, and we're trying to grow to 8 to 10 million, and the market shows that we can, especially based on our competitors that are probably quadruple that. So I guess that would be a question to the group is, what is your guys' average percentage of profit on a single, order, I would say? Or, how would is there something that I'm missing in the costing model that we create when it comes to overhead employee, or is there a ratio that I'm missing here, right? So that is one thing that we're looking at deeply in our company right now, because we seem that even if we're at a 40% margin, we seem to think that maybe we're only at a 17 or 15% margin at the end of the day.
It's actually a really good question, Aaron. And from my experience, it depends on the volume of the product and the market that you're in. So, for instance, I've just, this is like hot off the press, just signed with a company in Ohio. And they're a greenfield manufacturing process. And they've never been in this marketplace before. And so they've got an expert there, and they've got me that they've contacted to be the expert to help them systemize their manufacturing before they even start, and their pricing and everything. And their thought process on pricing has no relationship to reality. And so it's quite interesting having these discussions with them. But having been in that industry before, the markup is like really small in this industry. It's metal roofing manufacturing.
Okay.
Mainly. So if you think about it and you go, 1 lineal foot, you might be making 40 cents or $1 or $2. I don't know. It could be something quite small. But when you look at one roof needs 400 to 700 lineal feet, then all of a sudden you can't just have 1 lineal foot of metal. But if you go to what Dr. Allen was saying, you might say, well, if you're only going to order one, that's a special order, and you have to charge more for that because it takes all the time to set up the color going into the machine. So you have to have a minimum quantity before it gets to the good price. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but I think volume has a lot to do with it. And then also you've got to look at your competitors, and then what is the actual benefit of them choosing you over the competitors.
Right.
And generally that ends up being you offer a better service and you're on time. So then people are willing to pay more for that. So there's all of these different factors in there, and what the market can bear as well.
And that's where we're at the, I would say, top of the line for where we are at in the market. We compete in that kind of space with the top of the line competitors, right? And that's when, so I know that, it would be difficult to raise my prices, right? Because we're just underneath our competitors enough to win a lot more deals. Our service is strong, right? And we've built out a robust brand. Now I'm just looking at how much I'm making everything for versus how much I'm charging for. I seem to think that I've got the numbers figured out on my wrap rate and what my percentages should be. I feel like I'm missing a number in somewhere, whether it's a machine time rate for my machines running when somebody's not there, or whether it's a rate that I'm missing, that I'm not charging enough for my overhead for the space that we have to do to produce these, right? So that's where I'm not, like I said, I've come from a restaurant background, right? So I'm usually operating on very small margins. And I know food costing and, overhead costing there, but I feel like I'm missing something in the overhead costing for our, 40,000, 25,000. It's 30,000 square feet is what we have. And for some reason, it's not computing enough, right? I feel like we're always having to spend to get the jobs out the door, right? And kiosks are hard, and that's probably why there's not a lot of people in the US that do it. To be honest with you, there's probably only, in my space, there's probably five competitors nationwide that do this. So No, that's volume is a great point, because that's the one thing that we're looking at too, is not selling single units, but 5 or 10, and that's what a lot of our competitors do. So it's a great point. So thank you for that.
So Aaron, I have an observation. You said that you used to be a job shop. You're trying to move away from that, but what you just said about the way that you're pricing and costing, it still sounds like a job shop, because that's the way a
Okay.
job shop does it, right? Time and materials,
Right.
overhead costing.
Yep.
So that's just an observation.
Okay. So is there another way to cost that out other than just overhead, time, materials, labor?
Yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is I don't know if we have time to go through all of that.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. No.
But what you explain is the standard, right? So this is what we see, and Dr. Barnard can explain this in great detail. Is that a mistake that is made a lot with pricing is we cost everything and then kind of lump those costs together, and then we say, okay, we're gonna charge that 40% more or whatever, right?
Right.
And so the problem comes into the idea that you can cost individual items. That's really at the end of the day, that's an issue that you run into.
Okay.
So I think what I like to think about always is there's a couple of references that you've got when you are pricing, right? The one is this: if you just wanted to cover your raw material cost, right? That would be one extreme.
Right.
I just want to cover that. That tells me the lowest I could potentially offer a product to a customer if I'm really squeezed and I just want the throughput. What is that price? And it has to cover my raw material cost. The other side of that equation is what's the maximum the customer are willing to pay. But what Fear of Constraints does is it gives you a really interesting other reference point, and it's based on a basic law of economics. It says that you profit maximize, not when you produce the products with the highest gross profit or highest gross margin, but you profit maximize when you produce the product with the highest gross margin per scarce resource. So if you have two products, one has got a 60% margin, right? And the other one has got a 40% margin. We would say that if I had to prioritize which one would I want to do, I would go for the one with 60% margin, right?
Right.
But what if I told you that the one with a 60% margin is giving you only $500 per hour of constraint time, and the one with a 40% margin gives you $1,000 an hour per constraint time, right? It's a different reference model.
Right.
So then you can ask yourself, well, which product would I like to produce? One that makes me money at a rate of $500 an hour, or one that makes me money at $1,000 an hour. So you can go backwards from your system. If I just summarize it quickly, so say you have sales of 3.6 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's about 300,000 a month, right?
Right.
So you wanted 20% net profit, so that's 60,000.
Mm-hmm.
So you can work backwards and say, if I had a 50% margin, just to keep the numbers simple, right? I need throughput of 150,000. And minus the operating expenses of 90,000, that will leave me with 60,000 profit, right? So I'm looking for, I need to generate $150,000 per month of gross profit of throughput. I can divide that by the amount of hours I've got, which is about, say, 180 or so, and I get to $1,000 an hour. So that would be one reference point that you're looking at, is when you're pricing your product, your service, is you want to get to a point where I'm pricing it at a point that I'm generating $1,000 an hour with this product. So I can calculate backwards. All I need to know is I don't need the whole routing of that product. I just need to know how much of my constraint time will it take me, and then I can work backwards.
Right. Okay.
Right? And then it's like, I don't care what product I'm producing, because all of them are generating $1,000 an hour, right?
Right.
This is where we price the products all to generate 30% or 40% or 50% gross profit, but we never get that. Why is that? Because we've left out a critical element, is how much time does it take on my constraint? And of course, there's this concept of a free product, which is if I produce this free product, it doesn't take any constraint time, right?
Right.
So anything I get more than my variable cost will drop directly to my bottom line. So I hope that's useful. I hope that everybody else can also see it. You can do it for both products and services, is to price based on how much dollars per hour of my constraint do I want to generate. And that's also true if I'm the constraint. If I'm a single person business, I'm the bottleneck. I should really be thinking about how to price my services based on the desired amount of dollars per hour I want to generate.
From a revenue standpoint, a couple of things to think about. One is your buyer is the one who determines the value that they're willing to pay for at the time of contract.
Right.
When we think about products, that's not how buyers think when they buy. They think about the offer you're making to them that's going to solve their problem.
Right.
And that offer includes obviously pricing, warranty, services, time. From the buyer's frame of reference, the offer is like 1 out of 50 variables that's running around in their head. So that's the first thing, is just recognize what the buyer thinks is valuable. And often the product is only a small part of that. Sometimes your business model and the other things that go on around that are more important than your product, because they think you're competitive with those other people. The second thing is the way you approach that market, you're training the market who you are and what you're worth. If you think of yourself as time and material compared to competitors, your buyer's going to think about you the same way. If you really are in some way, shape, or form a thought leader, and some of that zero cost constraint part is the value you bring to the table, you need to train them that that's part of what you do. The next thing that the buyer cares about in the research today is they very clearly care about the future even more than the current short-term transaction. So if they're going to do business with somebody today, they hope it's the same somebody they want to partner up with for the long term, so
Right.
they don't have to go through this whole process over and over and over again. So make sure your offer is not just about what you're doing for them today, but it's what you're doing for them for a very long period of time.
Yep.
The last thing to think about is the market, statistically, like everything else, breaks into a bell curve. And the left side of the bell curve, the market typically pays high margins. The right side of the bell curve, they pay as little as they can possibly get away with.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to decide who your buyer is. And if you spend your time calling on buyers on the right side and you're worried about margin, you're going to keep worrying about margin.
Right.
If you call on buyers on the left side that are wanting your thought leadership, wanting those no cost variables that come from your IP or your brain or your wisdom, then you get a completely different result. You contract different, you price different. It's a completely different scenario.
I have a fun story to make Rick's point about pricing. So I knew someone that was working with this company, and they created some type of handbag out of green materials, all this stuff, right? So that was really their selling point, was it looks nice, but it's good for the environment. And so they priced the handbag at $50, and their site went live, and they were people were by e-commerce, right? So they were selling it, and they started selling a lot of these handbags. And the owner of the company called this pricing consultant up, she was freaking out. She's like, they did it wrong on the website. We're selling bags like crazy, but they got the pricing wrong. He's like, oh no, what happened? She said, they priced them at $500. And he's like, what's the problem? She goes, well, that's wrong. They're only supposed to be 50. And she was really upset about that. He's like, He's like, the market is telling you something. Listen. She didn't listen. So it turned out one of the people that bought her handbags was Courtney Cox, right? The actress. She actually reached out and said, I'm sorry, Ms. Cox. I owe you a refund. That bag was only supposed to be $50. You know what happened? She returned the bag. And all of her friends also returned the bags. They wanted it when it was $500. They didn't want it was $50. So pricing is important, but not always the way you think.
Aaron, one more point, building on what Rick was saying, is that, you know, people have a reference in their mind. So sometimes if they already have an alternative, you know, you have to consider that they have an alternative. And one of the things that I think Strategic Value Plus does very well is you have to look at the total life cycle cost. So when you are competing with somebody, they might be giving them just a purchase cost, right? That might be lower than what yours is. And what you want to do is to show them what the total life cycle cost is. We did a project once with an explosives company in South Africa that just the imported cost of the Chinese explosives companies were below their variable cost, right? It's like, how do I compete? You know, it's like, I can't. And then we started looking at, well, what's the total cost for mine to buy from the Chinese company? Well, the first thing is they have to have a letter of credit and pay up front. They have to carry 4 or 5 months worth of inventory. If something goes wrong in that supply chain, right, to try and return product that wasn't working is an absolute catastrophe. So we started just focusing on, yes, absolutely. If you don't care about reliability, if you don't care about working capital, if you don't absolutely buy from the Chinese, in fact, we would buy from them if we knew that you weren't sensitive to those things, right? Because we wouldn't manufacture it ourselves. We just buy it from them. Here's why we manufacture it ourselves, because ultimately our total life cycle cost is actually substantially lower than theirs.
Okay.
Just
Wow.
another point, Aaron, as well, is when I was doing the pricing for the customers in a manufacturing place, some of them would come at me really hard wanting a particular product at a lower price. And if you didn't hang on to the fact that that was what they wanted and you gave them that, you just made the other products more expensive.
Right.
So you ended up making roughly the same amount of money out of the sale, but the customer had in their mind, I got a really good deal on this product. And I buy hundreds of square meters of that, but I only buy a small amount of this other stuff. But that other stuff, if you mark that up more, ends up working out. So there's different ways. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have any comments? And I'd like to also circle back with Aaron to get his what was it that resonated with him in this very rich conversation. Thank you, everybody.
I just have one more thing to add on pricing, since this is really important, is that the mistake I see a lot of companies make is they think there's just one price, right? To follow what Nicholas said. You don't have to sell the same thing to everybody for the same price. That's one thing, right? And it can change over time. And just like Nicholas said, so sometimes you can do package deals, right? So there are lots of different ways to do pricing. Coca-Cola is a really good example of this, right? If you ask how much an ounce of Coca-Cola is, the big answer is it depends, right? And it's a dramatic difference, right? Whether you buy it here in this package, that package, this package, you know, and they make money off all of them, but there's a bunch of different ways to do it.
It's a great point that Dave is making. One of the first companies I worked with almost 25 years back was Zycon. They were doing, you know, semiconductor chips. They were selling chips, and they were the first one to have picked this up. So they said, if you order a chip from them, it would be 8 weeks lead time. You want to get it in 4 weeks? No problem. We can supply in 4 weeks, but it's double the price. And you want it in only 1 week? No problem, we can supply it, but it's 4 times the price. Why? Because there's a cost of having it, and then there's a cost of not having it, right? And you let the customer decide how important time is. So I think that's a great point, is there is no, and the airlines have proved it, right? There's no one price for a seat. It
Right.
depends on how important it is for you to get on a flight.
And determining how important it is should be part of your selling or marketing process. We teach people to do a joint statement of work process, which really defines the outcomes that the buyer thinks they want until they talk to you and you help educate them that there's a whole series of other choices they haven't considered. And what some of those choices expand the scope of work because they realize, oh my gosh, I could get 3 times the benefits if I do this versus what I asked for. And so when you do that joint statement of work process with them, they first, you're becoming a partner. By going through that process with them, you're no longer a transactional vendor. You're somebody who's in the trenches with them, trying to educate them and learn how you match to them going forward, whether it's time or whether it's customization or whatever those variables are. And a joint statement of work process can be done in minutes or it can be done in months. It depends on what business you're in and who your clients are. But when you do a contract that there's been no joint statement of work process, even online people do it by checking the boxes and saying, which of these things do you want? That changes the price. And so, that's again from that buyer's frame of reference, what do they value? And when you get to demonstrate you have IP or wisdom that they need, they're going to pay for it.
I'm not even really thinking about my own products, and everyone's just reminding me I've got an estimation service where it's $45 for a basic estimation. It's online, so people can choose that. That you get that back in 48 hours. If you want it back in 24 hours, it's an extra $25. If you want it back the same day, it's an extra $50. So it's actually more expensive to get it the same day on top of the actual. But some people just need it that day and they're willing to pay that extra amount. And they're the ones that are choosing. I don't even have to convince them. And another thing is I've got a large project. And so some people choose the large project, which is $200. And then when I look at the project, I think that's just a really simple project. But they think it's large. So there's all of these things are playing into everything.
Do you have any questions of anyone, Aaron?
No, a lot to digest, right? But all good stuff, right? I mean, what resonated with me a lot is, obviously the value based on the customer, like a lot of you are saying, like Nicholas and Rick are saying, right? Paying for the time. I really liked, what Dr. Allen was saying about the where you need to get, where you need to be per hour and what profit you need to be making per hour, right? That's definitely a different way to digest that compared to like Dave said, at going like a job shop mentality and still costing it out the same as that job shop, right? And costing it out differently and looking at it from a completely different lens than just going time, materials, overhead, spit out a percentage of profit, right? Because it's right. In my business, I have products that take some of my team 20 minutes to produce and box up and get ready to ship. And I have some products that take hours just to do wire integration, right? And just to integrate those things. So even if that's my highest profit, because I just looked at it yesterday, and some of my healthcare things that I do are my highest profit, but they take the longest to produce and ship out, then I might as well be selling the stuff that takes me 20 to 30 minutes to box up, and I could get out 10 times that amount of product at once, right? So those are just some of the things in my business that I hadn't looked at it through that lens before. So I do really appreciate that. So those are a lot of the things that resonated with me, but I honestly already have a page and a half of notes from everybody here. So I have to review the rest of it, but those were the top three.
And I think for everybody, it's a useful calculation to do, right? As to see how much your products or services are generating in terms of dollars per constraint hour. We recently did an analysis for steel manufacturer. It's a large steel manufacturer, but their products, when we did the calculations, were generating between $10,000 an hour and $250,000 an hour. And I had no idea, right? And it turns out that their salespeople were pushing the wrong products. It were pushing products that had high gross margins, but took an extremely a lot of time on the bottleneck because it had to be recycled a couple of times through the bottleneck to get it right, you know? So when you do those calculations, sometimes it's quite staggering that actually we're pushing the wrong product mix into the system.
Right. Yeah. No, I could definitely see that, and I can see where my salespeople push when it takes some of the longest. And even though the percentages are the same, if it's taking us, on that dollar per constraint hour, taking us a lot more, I could see that it's actually that's why feel like we're making less on that product, right?
And it's also a great way to justify the price because sometimes you have such close relationships, with your customers that they actually want full transparency in how you do pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good way of justifying it to say, listen, this is what my operating expenses are to pay back my capital, to cover everything. And in order to cover this with a fair margin of 20% net profit, I need to be generating $1,000 an hour. That's how we priced your product, right?
Yep.
So if you want to work with me to find ways that we can reduce the time it takes on the bottleneck, quite happy to give you a better price. But there's a lot of complexity because of the way that you want us to package it or the way that you want it to finish it that's taking a lot of our bottleneck time. So you can have the right discussion with customers.
Right. Okay.
So this is an odd comparison, but I think it resonates with people that have ever eaten at a restaurant. Hollandaise sauce. If you go to a restaurant and it's early in the morning, the last thing in the world the waiter wants to hear is that you order something with hollandaise sauce, because it takes the chef a ridiculous amount of time to make that relative to everything else on the menu, right? So he can cook up your steak and eggs like that, but if he has to make hollandaise sauce, it takes up, and on top of that, it's going to make everybody else's breakfast late, right? So whenever you think about this and you're thinking about pricing, I think that's an interesting story that I heard that everybody can understand.
Right. Chef background, so definitely understand that, right?
Do you have any follow-on services, Aaron? Maintenance?
So we do have a maintenance package. We have an installation package, right? That's some of the things that I did bring to the company probably over the last like 18 months is doing making sure that we have installation, making sure that we have shipping, making sure that we have white glove services, installation, maintenance, and then we also took our pricing off of our website. I had that a year ago, right? And I had to do that a year ago. And I'm glad that what you guys told me about pricing and that everything shouldn't cost the same. It depends, right? For an ounce of Coke, it verifies that we did the right thing there. We did that also because people were going to our site, which gets very good traction on Google, and good SEO. And then they were just saying, oh, that's the price. And then they might go away, right? Instead of inquiring with any of our sales, anybody in sales, because they are, okay, well, I know the price. I can either order it or I can just shop you without speaking to anybody, right? So that was one of the other reasons we did it. But it does sound like, we do cost things differently for different customers, right? Based on what they need and based on their variables. So good to hear that as well.
Great. What a great, rich conversation we've had here.
And Aaron, just for you to go back to your original question, is what is a good gross margin in your type of industry? It's probably around 60% gross margin, so you should be running at about 40% raw material cost.
Okay.
Just as a reference point, but you still need to do the calculations in terms of dollars per hour, but that's just a ballpark reference cost. Probably the highest you should be running at is 50%.
Okay.
Yeah, 40 to 50% variable cost as a percentage of revenue is a pretty good benchmark, at least to start as a quick check.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. That's good to know.
Okay, does anybody else have a burning issue that they would like to discuss? Or I just might ask a few people their thoughts on some things.
I think you should volunteer some more people, Mel.
Yeah, that was a really good
Okay.
conversation.
Oh, it really is. I mean, we're all learning, and we're all got our gray cells kind of buzzing now. But Nicholas, let's talk about your business a little bit.
Ooh, okay. I was just writing a message about how I'm going to have to go to sleep. Uh, well, I did have something to say that's a problem for me, and I'd like some advice or some input. And that is, I've developed this great system, which I had at a price point of $60,000, and that's because it takes quite a bit of energy to set it all up. Once it's set up, it's easy to manage, but invariably most people have, between 1,400 and 20,000 products that go into something that I'm setting up as a front end sales type system for a manufacturing place. And some of the increases in the numbers of products tend to be around color. So, for instance, a roofing company might have one particular product, which is like a panel shape, but that panel shape can come in different base metal thicknesses and different colors. So, in actual fact, that product might be several hundred products, but really it's just one product. It just comes in different variations, which all have different pricing. So my problem's not so much that the problem was that the downturn in the market in the Australian and New Zealand area, where I've been really pushing my products, is has affected people's thought processes on, I don't have enough money to set this up. I think it's a nice thing, but right now there's not enough throughput in the system that I'm feeling the pain point of needing this system, which is going to improve the ability when things do get really busy, that I don't need to hire staff and then train staff when we're in a point where it's hard to train staff because we're so busy, and then they don't know what they're doing and they make mistakes, and all of that stuff that they know from the past as their pain point is not present. So I then created a tiered system. So I created a tier 1 system, a tier 2 system, a tier 3 system. And I still wasn't successful in making those sales, but now I'm starting to do that with tier 1. And I think it's like, if I'm aiming at a company that's only got one manufacturing place, then that's tier 1. And if they've got 2 manufacturing places, it's tier 2, and 3 to 5, it's tier 3, and so on. But I guess it's the problem is, how do I get across to people that if you do the setup now, that when you are busy in 18 months' time, everything will work really well. You won't need to employ, $120,000 to $180,000 worth of new staff that are not going to be able to do the job properly, and everything will be easily done. I guess that's my pain point right now. Does that make sense? Sorry.
It does. The first thing that jumped to my mind is the old investment adage is that you make all your money in a bear market, right? And so
Right.
it's kind of a mindset thing, right? So I think that's the way to make the sell, is to get them in the mindset. It's like, okay, if we prep now, we're going to be, better later. And, you know, I think you're here at the beginning when Dr. Barnard was talking about the anti-fragile thing. This is case in point, anti-fragile, right? It's they're in a stress situation, and if they don't react to it properly, they're not going to come out stronger on the other side. And that's really what this comes down to. But that's hard, right? Because it's usually, you know, when times get tough, the CFOs go into, you know, contraction mode, and they're just holding on to stuff. They don't think that's the time to think about growth. But the people that do come out the other side stronger. I saw that during COVID. Most of the small manufacturers around me doing metalworking and plastic, you know, they laid off like half their staff, right? But then when the business came back, they were screwed because they didn't have people to work. And the ones that figured out a way to retain their staff, they gained market share coming out of that. So, and this isn't rocket science. This is business cycles happen like this all the time. And the companies that position themselves the right way are stronger on the other side. I don't know how you convince them of that, but that's basically the case that I would present.
To pick up on what Dave said, you're selling into manufacturing environments that may have as many as 5 or 6 or 7 locations. Those are very complex enterprise business opportunities. How many buyers do you believe are touching every deal? And what is it each of those buyers cares about in order for the deal to go forward?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by how many buyers? Like, are you talking about people like me offering a product? Are you talking about their customers?
Well, the research is really clear. When you're selling into an enterprise like that, you're looking at least 7 buyers in every deal. The buyers may be compliance, they may be data security, they may be legal, they may be procurement, they may be HR. And then it's the 2 or 3 people who really care about what you're doing. So for you to win that deal, particularly in a slow economy where you have to convince the 5 people who really don't give a rip about what you're doing, that they should go spend money and do organizational change in a bad economy, is a different task than when they know they're behind, they know they have to do something, and they'll buy almost anything to solve the short-term problem. You have to sell this in a completely different way. What do those other people want that would make them want to go forward?
Yeah, I get that. And I recently met someone that said he likes to make money, and we had some great chats. And one of the things that he said was, don't try and convince all the people that make the decisions, just convince the marketing department, and then they'll say that's what they want to be able to make everything happen, and that's how you get the deal. But I know it doesn't work in every place, but I thought that was an interesting way to make a sale. Yeah,
because you're describing a scenario, and I really don't know what your software looks like, but I'd expect there's a cutover of some kind. I'd expect there's some new data security issues. I'd suggest there's probably some compliance issues in there. There may be HR impacts. Any one of those 3 can veto you in a second.
Right.
Yes.
Whether marketing wants it or not doesn't matter. If they don't understand why you're there and what you're doing, they'll veto it. And there's other people who can veto it too. So going into that environment requires you to understand that buyer's community, and then know how to facilitate across those people that this is a in common need that they need to okay.
Got it.
Rick is spot on here. I've run into this so many times, right? It's like, if you got 5 different buyers, you have 5 different deals to make, because you're selling something different to each one. And to his point, the worst part is that not all of them can say yes, but all of them can say no. And so the ones that can say no sometimes are the ones you have to spend the most time on, unfortunately. This is why I like working with little businesses where it's just me and the owner.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had one of my first experiences when I started this business was dealing with a publicly listed company, and it is the most frustrating thing to do because you could get all these people saying yes, and then it gets to a person who needs to make the decision, and they're basically going, who can I blame if it goes wrong? And if there's no one they can blame, that's it. The deal's off, and they
Right.
just want to keep their job in that publicly listed company. And
that's part of the reason that concept of that joint statement of work is so important, because part of what that joint statement of work does is it shines light on who all the players are.
Yeah.
And you engage those players early when they understand the purpose of what you're doing. And then if you facilitate it right, they actually then participate in helping it happen because they understood the purpose and they embrace the purpose. If they only see it when you get to the what are we doing and how much does it cost, they'll have a million reasons why it shouldn't go forward.
Yeah.
It's a good reference is a friend of mine owns a company called Tech. Don't know if you've heard of it. They supply software to freight forwarders like DHL, FedEx, etc. They're about just under $1 billion in revenue. They have a market cap valuation of $40 billion. They have a multiple of 40 times revenues. Right. And the company is based on just two principles. What Richard White did was theory of constraints is one of them. He recognized that if you can help your customers remove a constraint in their business, you can get a premium. And the second part is studying, behavioral economics, understanding that people weigh negative stresses much greater than positive stresses, right?
Yeah.
So the key thing to sell into enterprise is to highlight that your product is protecting them against the downside. And if somebody is not buying, they are actually creating a risk, an avoidable risk to the company.
Yeah.
That's how he's been able to grow his business that massively, is the way that they develop their product and the way that they sell their product is based on those two fundamental principles. Is you have a constraint, our software helps you to overcome that constraint. And secondly, you have major risks in your business. And
Yeah.
our software helps you to mitigate those risks. So if you don't buy, I'm going to remind you every month, right?
Yeah.
What the cost was of not buying from me that we could have protected you. So that it's just a little hint in terms of the direction to go to.
Yeah, I have a pain point that I solve, which is we have a trim specifier. So the customer can design the trim on the website for a bespoke trim. So generally what contractors do is they just draw it on a piece of chipboard or a piece of timber or the back of a napkin, and then they take a photo with their phone and then they send it to the manufacturer and say, make this. And, a 3 looks like an 8, a 7 looks like a 2, and then it gets delivered and it's wrong. And then it's the manufacturer's fault, and then and so those types of mistakes can, depending on the order, can cost thousands of dollars. And so I've been to customers and potential customers, and I've said, we solved this issue for you. And some of these guys will stand there black and blue and say, oh, we never have any mistakes. And I used to work in the industry. I actually used to work on the machines as well, and I just sit there and go, really? But that's yeah. So
Because that's a perfect example of if you take Dr. Barnard's why we have to do this, and then you facilitate that through marketing would say, you're going to help us sell more. You're going to help us have a much loyaler group of contractors out in the market, and the contractors in the market are going to have an easier time getting their clients because of this tool. And then you have the people in quality control saying, it's going to reduce our refunds and our redos because of this, that you're in a situation where those multiple buyers can be your win behind your sale.
Yeah.
And Nicholas,
Yeah.
one thing, if you study decision making, right, it's hard to make decisions when it feels like the cost is certain and the benefit is uncertain.
Yeah.
Right. And what I've realized studying decision making is we confuse variability with uncertainty.
Mm.
Mean by that is that there's always a range of the cost and there's a range of the benefit, right? It's outside of those ranges. It's not uncertain. What feels uncertain is I don't know, am I going to get a benefit of 10 or 100?
Yes.
Right? And I don't know what the cost is. What I do know is going to be between 3 and 10. Okay, so what you want to help your buyer with is to show them that the worst case benefit of using your product over the long term is still much, much greater than the worst case cost.
Yes.
That makes it a very easy decision for them. Don't,
Yeah.
because as soon as you say, here's our price, here's your benefit, they already think you're biased, right? So they think what you're doing is you're comparing the best case benefit for them to the best case, which is the lowest price.
Mm.
They immediately say, I'm suspicious, right? So you go in and you go, you know, your benefit is going to be 50 and your cost is only going to be 10. That's going to be a 5x. And they go, I know people exaggerate. So that 50 is probably going to be 10 and the 10 is probably going to be 20, right? And they go, I'm getting negative value, whereas you think you're getting 5x positive value. So the way to trick it out is to say, let's go and estimate together. I'm going to show you for each case what's the best worst case. We're going to compare the worst case benefit with the worst case cost. And if that is still better, then it should be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You can help with the buyer walk through a preview of what their world will look like when they apply your particular partnership approach.
Mm.
And as they are experiencing mentally this preview, and you've got the marketing preview, the quality control preview, the fact that your customer's customer is going to like your customer better and they're going to like you, more loyalty. And you go through all that with them. And then you ask them the question, what's the impact that you expect this to have on your business? I guarantee you they will give you a bigger number of impact than you would have given them if you gave the ROI, which they don't believe.
Yes. Yeah. That's awesome. That's a great way of looking at it. And thank you, both of you. I was just thinking before, you know, when I was a consultant to the industry, people were lining up for my advice. And now I've developed something that was solving the issue I saw they all had. No one wants to listen to me because I'm selling something, you know? It's so funny. I've got the answer, but they don't want to know because I'm selling it to them. It's
Right.
yeah.
Nicholas, it's not funny, it's sad. You know,
Yes.
nobody's we've all been there. But it's just, that's one of the things I learned from Richard White is like, you need to understand human psychology.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, if you're in sales, the best salespeople understand human psychology better than anybody else. That's why they outperform all the other peers, you know? So to really understand, what are people afraid of?
Mm.
And one of the biggest things I've realized, it happens frequently with us when you are selling something that's counterintuitive, like theory of constraints or Six Sigma or whatever. The worst thing that can happen to a professional is to be exposed as a non-expert, right? So if you walk in there showing people that, yes, you have a very complicated problem, but the solution is really simple, right? You think that you'll get a positive response to that, but actually the response is negative because you've just made those people feel like idiots.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So you really have to pay attention to that. It took me a minute to figure that out. Is you have to give them some credit, is to say, listen, you couldn't have had this insight before because the software was just not available or the know-how was just not available. That's what we are providing you, right? So yes, it looks deceivingly simple, but it's very counterintuitive. It's very easy to get this wrong. So that's what I kind of push on my decision-making side is in complex systems, it's very, very easy to make a bad decision and actually quite hard to learn from mistakes. I want to help you do the opposite. I want to make it hard to make a bad decision because of the tools that we provide you, like a digital twin simulation model where you can test all the options before you even try it, right? And I want to make it easy for you to learn from your mistakes.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
So yeah, in summary, what would you say you've gotten out of that, Nicholas?
Yeah, I think there's an element of me that makes people feel stupid if I offer them a simple solution. Like if someone said to me, "We don't have any mistakes," I'd actually I was nailing them, saying that's a load of BS, instead of working with them, going fantastic, But one of the it brings back to a thought I had the other day about people saying no one would use the ordering system. But when it's really busy, if you've got people using the ordering system and you've only got a certain amount of capacity to manufacture, then the people who use the ordering system are jumping the queue than the ones who are sending it in on a piece of paper. Because the ones that send it on a piece of paper, if it doesn't get put into the system, they're going to miss out. So those people who complain they didn't get their job delivered on time are going to be told, or if you put it in the system, there's different thought processes I've been having about how to pitch the concept of what the solution is solving. But yeah, I really liked what Rick was what you just said just before about the psychology and working with that pitch and also Dr. Barnard's use of psychology. I did a lot of sales when I was younger, and this understanding the psychology of sales was really it made selling really easy. So I've just got to use some of my skills in that I gained from I was very successful at door-to-door sales, and I tell friends that's because people didn't get to know me yet to know they didn't like me. But that the person that said no to me ended up getting the lot. They opened the door and went no. It's like, yeah, and just use that psychology to have them decide. You go, that's an amazing decision you made to get this, and this, and take the extra pack. I think it's really wise and well worth it. They didn't even know they decided that. It was just the way that it was all worded. So if I can use those skills to turn things around, instead of maybe there's an air of desperation in myself as well going in there. It doesn't sort of work well with the psychology of people.
Yeah, Nicholas, one other thing based on what you just said a second ago, what I heard you say is the way many of the prospects are doing business today is more random than if they were using your approach. Did I hear that correct?
It's manual and so everything's manual. The data entry into their systems is manual.
Okay.
And in some cases, they're a small business. They don't have any systems. It's all manual. I've got whiteboards that do their manufacturing processing.
So
yeah.
Given that, one of the things you would help people do is when they're ready to start to apply AI, your structure would make that much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
And I've been a really
point,
against AI until recently.
Yeah. I mean, AI needs structured data to train on. It can't train on analog forms, right? So I think that's a great point that Rick is raising.
Yeah. I just started using chat. Really quick story off topic. I got a friend of mine convinced me to do it, to write a proposal, It was amazing. It helped. It's like getting rid of your writer's block. But the same day, my neighbor from property that I have in northern New South Wales sent me a letter saying, I want to build a fence and I want you to pay half for it. And there's already a fence there that serves a purpose, a boundary. It's a boundary fence. You don't need anything else. But he's got a swimming pool he's just put in. So he wants privacy. So he wants a tall fence and all that type of stuff. So I nearly just wrote an email back saying, go back to Sydney. This is the country, you know, you want privacy, go back to the city and build a fence, you know. But in the end, I put everything into chat and I said, please write a polite letter saying you can build your fence. I'm happy for you to do it. I just won't pay for it because of whatever local laws relate to this situation. And like literally 5 seconds, it came back with an eloquent letter stating all of the relevant local council codes on fences and stuff. And yeah, I'm not paying for the fence. Thank you, chat.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, just from a manufacturing standpoint, I actually had my production manager and people that are working write their team's reviews on that, like my head assembler and that we have to get reviews done. But I'll tell you, it made it a lot easier, and HR approved them all without a blink of an eye, where it usually takes weeks for them to go back and forth with HR to make sure the language is correct, because these guys aren't people that use their computers or use, you know, this at all times. But I mean, it was just a savings for us when it came to using that just for something as simple as reviews, right?
Yeah.
And especially for the team that doesn't normally do that, right? And they were like, "Oh yeah, this is great, Aaron. We got to use this more often." So I'm with you.
I've just got another funny story from today. I'm actually in the Defense Force as a musician, and I was attending a function today, and a colonel got up and made a speech, and the speech was, in my mind, I immediately just went, he's just used ChatGPT to get this speech done, right? It went into detail that he should know nothing about, like it was about music and stuff. And then like literally I wasn't going to say anything because I'm like a private, you know, I'm just a musician. But this colonel comes up to me, another one, and is talking to me, and he goes, I said it was a lovely speech, and he said, sounds like he might have used ChatGPT to.
Yeah,
So,
it gets bad when you receive an email from somebody, beautifully written, and then at the bottom of the email it says, would you like to turn this into a PDF? Would you like?
Yeah.
It's like, you didn't even delete that part. Come on.
yeah.
Oh, that's a funny story. It's so awful when it happens. So,
It's like
hey
when
guys,
you get something from a salesperson and it says "Dear XXXXX." And you're like, "Did you not put my name in there? Did you forget?"
Oh golly. All right.
oh
Thank you.
well, yeah, such a great time, you guys. The time just flew, and I won't even attempt to try to summarize or highlight anything that happened today. But so I'd like to leave that to you. I'd like to go through the room here and our virtual room and have each of you tell us what your takeaway is and an actionable item you're going to be taking. Also, just request before I forget, please, please, please write us a nice review yourselves somehow, post about this this mastermind so that we can get more manufacturing related people into this room and have the kinds of conversations that we've had today. All right, so why don't we start with Tatiana?
She left the room.
She dropped off, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
it's
I
gone.
missed her then. Okay, Dave, since you're
Yeah,
standing on the
so
last screen.
I know I have some follow-up stuff I want to do with Aaron. Glad you can make it, Aaron. But I would say we need to put them on the spot and ask who they're going to in their network that they're going to invite to one of these. So I think
All right, the gauntlet has been thrown down.
Yeah, so I mean, on my side, I'll tell you guys it was great today. Thank you guys for the discussion. It lasted a long time. I got a lot of valuable information, and I've got a couple people from different local manufacturers in Maryland that I think would find this really valuable, from sign makers that I work with to, even custom printing services that I work with that, or like I was thinking about a company that was just told me about some struggles that you guys were just talking about that's local in Frederick that I can invite the CEO, because I'm a part of like a big Maryland manufacturers group and manufacturing, when it comes to the local areas. So I can think of a lot of people that find a lot of value with just what you guys are talking about. So that's what I'm
Fantastic.
thinking of right
I'll,
off.
I'll reach out to you and we can work on, I'll give you the links and how to
Awesome. That'd
register.
be great, Nell. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. Nicholas.
Yeah, I've got people in Australia that I could recommend can come along. It's just whether they'll be up at this time of the evening. It's like 2:30 a.m. right now. But as
Thank
I
you.
build my network in America, I'll certainly be recommending my customers come along to groups like this, which is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Rick, why don't you go next?
Well, I've read at least 2 books on anti-fragile, and Dr. Bernard's presentation with the 4 quadrants taught me more than the 2 books did.
Wow, thank you.
Oh, I just downloaded the Audible book.
Yes, it's amazing. I'm listening it to every morning, parts of it, so I can get through it. I've already listened to it maybe 3 times.
Yeah, Alan, I'm just impressed that you read that in one sitting.
Yeah, I
must
mean,
have been a lot.
it's a hard book because it gets quite technical, but I get into flow and you lose track of time, but that was one of the first ones. It was quite amazing. Now, one of the things I loved about this is, Napoleon Hill was the one that started these masterminds, right? And it basically was based on the premise that we all have unique experiences and lessons learned, etc. And that to me was, to hear everybody contributing was absolutely beautiful. I learned a lot. I made a lot of notes from what Rick was saying and Dave was saying and Nicholas was saying. So it was great to get everybody's opportunities to contribute.
Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Justice, how about hearing from you?
All right. So yeah, that was very awesome. I took a lot in. And then for me in particular, the biggest takeaway is I've been working on a project for now that is our ROI calculator, and then doing a lot of research. And then, listening to this conversation, I realized zero cost constraint is one thing that I really have to take into consideration. When working on this calculator project. So, the dollar per cost, per constraint hour, and all those things. So, yeah, it's big. And then also listening to the bigger conversation. Yeah, that was awesome. Like taking the discussion, working on like the pricing psychology, and then what people are willing to pay for, and all those things. For me, mostly from technical perspective, I look at what costs can you control, what are the things within your control that you can work on. But like listening to the other side is like, yeah, well, if someone can make a bag that they can sell for $50, then if people are willing to pay $500 for it, why not go for it? So that was kind of like an eye-opening thing for me.
Great. Yes, and yeah, all of us, let's invite people to these anti-fragile OEM masterminds, and we'll get the word out and we'll have even more rich conversations going forward. And I want to extend a special thanks to Dr. Barnard. As you all see, he's an extremely talented, very gifted and knowledgeable, very eloquent person. So I just want to thank him very much for being part of this. And we want to make this, expose Dr. Barnard to a lot more people, because he can change the world with his words.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you all. We'll see you again next Friday.
Yeah.
And
A great weekend.
yes, have a
Okay,
nice weekend,
thank you.
everybody.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Rick.